This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your hosts, Radio Joe Hughes and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQ Radio Plus. This week is episode 616. We welcome Paul LaGrange. We're going to talk about a building scientist's take on methods, myths, and mistakes. Before we get started, let's thank our sponsors. They are the reason we can continue doing the show. Please support our sponsors and let them know you appreciate their support of IAQ Radio Plus. Our marquee sponsor is Instascope at instascope.co. Our association sponsors are the American Industrial Hygiene Association at AIHA.org, the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists at ACGIH.org, the Cleaning Industry Research Institute at CIRIScience.org, the Indoor Air Quality Association at IAQA.org, the Restoration Industry Association at restorationindustry.org, the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification at IICRC.org, and Healthy Buildings America 2021 at HB2021-America.org. Industry sponsors are AEML Laboratories at AEMLINC.com, Particles Plus at particlesplus.com, Gray Wolf Sensing Solutions at graywolfsensing.com, TSI Inc. at TSI.com, and Healthy Indoors Magazine at healthyindoors.com.
And now you can win a cool prize. It's time for the IAQ Radio Trivia question. Be the first to correctly answer. Simply email your answer to czlotnick@cs.com. Or if listening live, just text your answer from your computer. And now, here's the Z-Man.
Hello, everyone. Congratulations go out to Dawn Weeks in Ontario, Canada, who was first to identify Bavarian beer purity laws as the oldest consumer protection laws still in existence. The IAQ Radio Trivia question for today, Friday, February 12, 2021, has been sponsored by TSI Inc., an industry leader in precision instrumentation for monitoring of the indoor air. Learn how to expand your IAQ investigations at tsi.com. Here is today's trivia question. Heat transfer is when thermal energy travels from one object to another. Name the three ways in which this occurs. Back to you, Joe.
All right, Cliff. This week we've got Paul LaGrange, a master forensic investigator for moisture and energy movement in both historic and new homes in the hot, humid Gulf Coast southern region of the United States. LaGrange Consulting is a full-service consulting company specializing in energy efficiency, indoor air quality, and sustainability in residential and commercial buildings. Paul was also a builder. He's got a radio show, a blog. He's got Paul's House. He's a multifaceted guy. He's also a great cook. Paul, welcome to IAQ Radio.
Good morning. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. Paul, let's start out with a little bit about LaGrange. What's the most common type of work you're doing, and how long have you had the company?
So LaGrange Consulting is a organization I put in place 1999, 2000 range. At the time, I was building homes, and I was really involved in the building science. And the reason for doing so is I was looking to provide my customers a better box and saying, how can I improve building durability, indoor air quality, comfort, and also be able to sell my homes for a higher price. Well, I was able and successful to be able to achieve my goals other than getting a higher appraisal from the local appraisers and selling for a higher price, but I was able to deliver a better product to my customers. So I was certainly happy with that. So I got so involved with building science and said, I really would like to be able to deliver this information to the local professionals, other builders, engineers, architects, plans drafts folks, as well as HVAC dealers. So I said, I really would like to get to the point where I can start offering some informational seminars to host these things and convey that information. So that's really how LaGrange Consulting got into play. I signed my last building contract for a custom design house in 1999, finished it in 2000. And other than my personal home and my mom and dad's house, I haven't built since. Still hold the licenses and insurance is just not active in the building process, more towards the consulting side of, again, conveying that information. And the other part of that is doing some forensic investigations on homes and commercial buildings when they're starting to experience some of these challenges related to the Gulf South region, mostly related to moisture. And then I really get thrilled when someone comes to me before they start construction and allows me to help them identify some of the pitfalls they can avoid. That doesn't happen very often. The majority of my work really deals with and revolves around problem solving, identifying causation, and then after identifying causation, offering some solutions so they can, prevent this from happening again in the future.
Well, I'm just curious, why do you feel like you ended up migrating into the consulting side as opposed to continuing to build these, nice energy efficient and high quality homes?
So I got to the point where it was hard to be excellent at both. In the construction side, it was a time where the industry was, and still is in some respects, we were losing our experienced trades. When I first got in the construction business, you had, the grandfather and the uncles and the brothers and your dad, and you were passing and transferring the information to the younger generations, and they carried through. We lost that transfer of knowledge probably in the early 90s. Where a lot of those younger generations were told, hey, you need to go out and become a doctor or a lawyer or a CPA and not get in construction. So there was a gap of loss of information. So it was very challenging to be able to build homes at the quality level that I was used to without leaving the job sites. And since we're doing custom design build, folks were paying really good money to getting the quality product that I was promising. And I always would like to over deliver and under promise that. So it was hard to be good at both and maintain the quality that I really wanted. So I decided, since I was building homes for so many years, I would be more of a consultant than I was an active builder.
You also have something called Paul's House on your website. I looked at it. I thought, this is an interesting concept. Where it looks like sort of like a referral network where you tell local people who they can use and who specializes in what. Can you tell listeners a little bit more about that and why you did it?
Absolutely. So I have the great honor of having a weekly call-in radio show on one of the largest radio stations here in the New Orleans area. And it happened, they started pursuing me right before Hurricane Katrina and Rita came through the state. And it got delayed because of the storm. But shortly after the hurricane had come through, we started the show. It's a 2-hour call-in radio show. And it was initially designed to give the folks that were rebuilding after the event. And it was, so widespread. You had a wide array of housing stock, where there was old historic homes or it was newer construction that all had to be rebuilt. So it was, the folks came in from out of state, and the local contractors and trades were trying to do the best they could, but they were applying the same building science principles and products for the old historic housing as they were for the brand new houses. And it had to be done really differently. So it was a means of communicating information so they make some informed choices based on their goals and their budget and what happened to their house. So it got to the point where I was only on the radio on Saturdays and occasionally during the week when I was a guest host. And a lot of folks were calling the office saying, hey, who can you recommend to do this type of work? Or what product would you recommend for this approach? But I wasn't in the office. Listen, I was out in the field. I was crawling through houses and attics and underneath homes and doing those inspections. So I wasn't at the office to answer the phone. So we put this website in place, Paul's House, paulshouse.com. And it really got the name of who would I recommend to do that type of work that I would be willing to have them come to my home, or sometimes I say on the radio, my mom's house, because you're not going to remember to go to your mom's house that you wouldn't feel comfortable. And that I would recommend saying, okay, this is the person I would recommend to come to your house to do this type of work. It's mostly local professionals and local vendors, but there are some national organizations that provide products that are on there that are, that do very good. Like for instance, the Dow products, the Tyvek and the fluid apply products are definitely on there. And there's a few others as well. Some of the drainage planes, the home slicker type products that I recommend on a regular basis are for the older housing stock, and which I know we'll get to a little bit later on in the show. But it's really designed to give the listener a resource that's available 24/7 to see who would I recommend to come to their house or their place of business and do some improvements.
It seems like it probably saved you a lot of headache too. I mean, it's tough to put it together, but once it's together, you don't have to answer all those questions. Just say, go to paulshouse.com.
Exactly.
I love it. All right. So, excuse me, on that weekly radio show, I'm just curious, what's the most common types of questions you get from homeowners?
So it's somewhat seasonal. This time of year, as you can imagine, in the Gulf South, our weather now, and today's a good example where the outside air is really saturated, but it's cold and it's very uncomfortable. So it's that damp cold that we have so common in the winter. So we have moisture problems mostly related to like around windows. And it could be the older housing stock that has the old fashioned double hung wood window frames, not insulated glass. And the outside and the inside conditions are coming into place, and the windows are condensating. They're reaching dew point and it's condensing. And we also have that with some of the older homes. They have aluminum window frames, even with insulated glass. Or it's the wood flooring. My raised house is extremely cold this time of year. What can I do about it? And then we have the comfort side of it is, man, my heater just runs and runs and runs, and my house is so inefficient, leaking so much of the outside conditions coming in, and I'm cold, or my utility bills are high. So this time of year, those are the type questions. But summertime, it's I have a raised house and my wood floors are cupped. Why is that occurring? Or I have warmer parts of my house versus other parts and warmer, or my utility bills are high, or my air conditioning just runs and runs and runs, and I can't get my house comfortable. Those are pretty common summertime questions.
A 2-hour show is a pretty long show, Paul. I mean, and you do this every Saturday?
Every Saturday, yes, sir.
Still get plenty of people calling in and asking questions. Interesting. Well,
I'm truly amazed they still calling and asking questions. And we've been doing this since 2005, and it's I keep thinking to myself, they're going to stop calling eventually, but they never do. They keep calling. It's a fun show. You never know what they're going to ask you live on the radio.
Interesting. All right, let's go to your presentation at summer camp in 2018. I want to go through those slides, talk a little bit about building science, myths, mistakes. We changed lies to methods, myths, and mistakes, but you'll see lies on here as well, which I think is interesting. Let's look at first this industry failure. What do you mean by this is a design flaw here? It looks like we've got some wood that's, wood floor that's cupped up.
Yeah, so essentially for our building science folks, the water vapor barrier is on the wrong side of the floor assembly. So in this case, that polyurethane finish on top of that wood flooring is preventing the diffusion of water vapor from outside in the crawl space migrating inward into the house. And if you look at that lower right side photograph, you'll see that's the underside of the wood flooring. And there's some organic growth on the bottom side of that. And so these crawl spaces, depending on the house itself, sometimes they're a few inches off the ground, sometimes they're a few feet off the ground. Occasionally they have air conditioning equipment and ductwork located within the crawl space. Sometimes they have lots of ventilation, sometimes they have very limited ventilation. There are occasions when I see that the elevation of the ground underneath the footprint of the house is lower than the surrounding yard and garden. And when it rains, it's like a little mini lake underneath our house. So there's lots of variables to this, but essentially the building science is the same, is that we're going from more to less. So we're going from wet to dry. And when you have a customer that keeps the inside of their house very cold below the summertime dew point temperatures, and they may have some differential pressures that are exacerbating this, these wood floors become saturated and start cupping. And as you see in this photograph, that That was taken in November of 2003. So that floor was standing up. So they were still experiencing some substantial movement of the wood flooring even after our summer cooling season has passed.
So there's a lot of issues in this photo, but you mentioned the polyurethane coating. What if they had used a different coating? Would you recommend that to start with, or is this something where you're going to have to just correct everything because it's gotten so far along?
I really wish that our flooring industry would respond to us folks here in the Gulf South, because this is a truly common problem. We need a durable finish that lets that water vapor come migrate through, where it doesn't slow down that water vapor transfer enough where it allows those wood floors to become cupped. So I'm a belt and suspenders guy. And what I mean by that is I'm gonna wear a belt and suspenders at the same time so my pants never fall down. And you got to also keep in mind too, Joe, is that folks don't hire me to come to their building or to their home to see things work well. They only hire me to come see the problems. So by the time I get to, and I'm engaged in the process, they're looking for a solution that will always work under all conditions. So in this scenario, and you brought up a very good question, what do we do for the finish? If we can't use polyurethane, but we want to have a wood flooring, what do we do? Well, I remember as a young teenager, one of my jobs at my grandparents' house that lived in a raised house with wood flooring is we used to take beeswax and we used to buff the floors with beeswax.
No.
Or tongue oil. Tongue oil or an oil rub would be another good selection in lieu of the polyurethane. Now, good selection because of moisture, not a great selection because of durability. I mean, I think the oil rubs and the wax finishes look good when you first put them on, but they require a lot of maintenance, particularly in the high traffic areas. And the other side of this is I would do something underneath. So depending on the condition, depending on the location, I would, and also the termite history, if they have termites or not, I would look at a number of potential options, assess the scenario, and come up with the best case recommendation. So, my tool belt would tell me, listen, you can create a semi-conditioned crawl space with active dehumidifiers with some ground cover and closing the outer perimeter. That's a great solution, particularly if the house has had a history of termites. That way, when you have your annual termite inspections, there's full disclosure. The exterminating company can see everything. It's not covered up with. The other option would be a 2-pound density closed cell spray polyurethane foam applied at least 2 inches thick. Or you could also use a foam board, a polyisonate foam board attached to the bottom side of the floor joist that's taped in a continuous manner that's uninterrupted and air sealed on the edges, and the butt seams are taped. The penetrations are sealed with a 1-component foam. There's some variables to that, but those are my 3 go-to type solutions for this type of scenario.
All right, let's go to the next one, John. This looks
Right.
similar, Paul, but I'm assuming there's something a little different here.
Yeah, so here's where the installer, the bottom left-hand side photograph, this is where the HVAC dealer did a really poor job of deciding where to place that supply register. So this house is plaster, and you can see that this problem has been happening for quite some time. This house was also balloon framed, so it had a direct communication with the moist crawl space down below. So the cavities within this stud framing of this wall are open and communicating with the crawl space down below. You had cold air from the supply register being applied to the plaster. And the reason I think it's been ongoing is because if you notice the lower portion of the wall, they put a stone there because they get tired of replacing or repairing the plaster down below. So they cut out the plaster, put in a granite down below, and then put a baseboard trim on top of it. But if you notice, the problem just continued to migrate a little bit higher up the wall. As you can see, the plaster is deformed because of the moisture problems. This house also had some negative pressures inside the home. So you can see this, it was this very rarely to get to a house where there's this one cause. It's cumulative effect of a lot of different things happening in a number of different areas that are resulting in some of the problems you're having.
What is those top left photos? Looks like mold on a door. It looks like a pocket door.
And it's a pocket door. You got a great eye there, Joe. And it is communicating with the outside condition and also the attic above it. So again, bathrooms are a really hard spot to control moisture. We had some negative pressures in that space, and that pocket door framing was communicating with the attic and outside conditions. And you can tell that we had some organic growth at the top right-hand side of that pocket door. You know, I think in this scenario, we could do a better job of source control, of getting rid of the moisture, the elevated moisture in the bathroom with some exhaust fans, with some, you know, training with the homeowner of when and how to use it. But we could have done a better job of air sealing and insulating that framing before we installed drywall at that house. So that's what I'm saying. That's an industry failure. They just weren't thinking ahead.
Okay. And that's, you know, it's interesting because sometimes what solves one issue may exacerbate another. So you put an exhaust fan in that bathroom.
That's correct.
Now you're creating a negative pressure and you're exacerbating the issue with the balloon framing and so on. It's fascinating. All right, let's go to the next one, John. Laziness and stupidity. What do we have here, Paul?
You'll be surprised how often I see this. So we do have a bathroom exhaust fan that was installed. And instead of taking the exhaust ducting and bring it either through a gable-end wall or an extended, you know, overhang or roof penetration, they just decided to, let me go ahead and put this flex duct near a power exhaust fan. What I love about this is you're not really removing the moisture from the attic space. And the other part is that when that exhaust fan turns on, we were creating a negative pressure in that bathroom without the bathroom fan operating. We had moisture problems down below. Is no big surprise here. So this is this laziness and I think a little bit of stupidity.
These exhaust fans, pretty common in older homes.
Yes.
They can cause problems. What do you recommend when you see these in these older homes? Is it something you try and get people to remove, or do you find a way to use it and you know, do other things to stop problems from occurring when you're pulling that warm, moist air in?
So I'm a large proponent of source control. So I want to remove the moisture of the bathrooms and also the cooktops, where it's the two most, you know, higher sources of moisture we have by living in our houses. However, I want some controls on it. My preference is that this bathroom exhaust fan will be operated by Humidistat. So as it senses moisture elevating in the bathroom, it will turn on. And as the moisture is removed, it'll cycle off. And, you know, I like that because it really takes the homeowner out of the equation. You never have to remember to turn the fan on. You have to remember to go back and turn the fan off. And then I'm coaching my homeowners on how, you know, to operate the bathroom, you know, close the bathroom doors, let the exhaust fan remove the moisture at the source, you know, come back a little bit later, 20 minutes, 30 minutes after you've taken the shower, open that bathroom door. I'm okay with a slight negative pressure for a short period of time because I believe we're doing more good by removing the majority of the moisture in that bathroom and or cooktop, depending what exhaust fan we're talking about, as opposed to letting that moisture migrate throughout the rest of the house when we don't use the exhaust fan.
Okay, let's go to the next one, John. I've got a couple text questions. I will get to those in a little bit here, Ed, just letting you know. The Kraken, this is amazing here, huh? No words for this one. What are we looking at here, Paul?
So we have a homeowner who called me and said, listen, the right-hand side of my house is hot. I have a new air conditioning system, and I was told this would solve the problem. My left-hand side, where my bedrooms are comfortable, my right-hand side, where the living space is just hot. And I don't know why. The AC guy's been out here numerous times. He says the machine is working perfectly, and I'm just a complaining owner. So I climb up in the attic, and the first thing I see is, my gosh, there's absolutely no way that the air distribution system, the ductwork design, is going to function in this home. So what we have is a very large flexible trunk line, which is not sized properly. First of all, it's not stretched tight. It's kind of slinky and bunched up. So you're not getting the proper airflow through it. And then it goes into a pressure box that feeds a number of different other flexible ductwork that is poorly installed to begin with to get proper airflow. And the other side is, how do you balance it? there's absolutely no way you're going to balance the airflow and get even distribution throughout the home. So of course there's going to be hot and cold spots in the house. So, you know, my first thing was, listen, we need to work very carefully with this HVAC installer. And apparently he doesn't understand duct design. And he should have recommended that you replace your ductwork when you replace your equipment. The other side of this that really bugs me quite a bit is that this homeowner, like many homeowners, are making an investment to purchase high efficiency equipment. And most times the variable capacity air conditioning system. And these AC installers believe that that variable speed system, the ECM motor, is going to overcome poor duct design. There is no way that a variable capacity machine is going to overcome this much errors, these many errors in this duct design to be able to allow this customer to be comfortable. So you have the comfort concern, but then you also have the equipment durability and longevity concern. This equipment is not going to last as long as you would expect it to. They're expensive. The homeowner's expecting, 18, 19 years worth of useful life. In reality, they're hanging out around, 12 or 13 years because of a poor duct design. You got high head pressures on the compressor. You got pop coils that are occurring, and your house is uncomfortable, and you have high operating costs on top of all of this. So, when a homeowner, hears these things after, investing quite a few thousands of dollars in new equipment, that's the last thing you want to hear. But at the same time, that's the message I need to deliver, because it's the truth. I mean, when you start looking at how the system is designed and installed, there's absolutely no possible way it can function the way you expect it to function.
Because it's the truth. I like that. Cliff, let me know if you want to jump in here at any point.
No, I'll deal with the text ones if you want.
Go ahead. Why don't you do that? I got a little computer issue I have to deal with here, but I'll be right back. Go ahead, Cliff.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Okay, let's see. What do we got here? I guess question number one is a follow-up to following Katrina with the Chinese drywall problem. Has that been resolved? Do you have any comments on the quality of the mitigation work done by contractors that were paid through the litigation settlement? Are there still corrosion and odor problems going on in these houses?
So I served as an expert witness in the federal case for the Chinese drywall. And so I got the opportunity to see a lot of homes that were contaminated, did a lot of sampling for different organizations. And it was legit. I mean, when you start digging into the off-gassing in this product, looking at the evaporator coils, the copper, the electrical copper lines, you can certainly see the corrosion. There were occasions, depending on the amount of Chinese drywall, because not all these homes were completely gutted. They were partially gutted. So some of it had the original drywall and some of it had the new drywall. And then another component of this too is that when and Cliff, you can pick up on this really quick, is the more energy efficient these homes were rebuilt, the tighter the building envelope, how well the indoor conditions were controlled with temperature as well as indoor, moisture content, had a direct impact to the off-gassing of the Chinese drywall product. So there's a lot of different variables that went into this. I don't see that very often. Occasionally I will have a phone call about, hey, I'm still having some effects from the Chinese drywall. I do know that from the remediation standpoint, if you went through that process and your home was gutted and you replaced your HVAC, your electrical, your copper piping, there was a great level of success with that. There were some homes were doing that process where I was called into that were gutted as a means of remediating and going through that process, where the backside of brick veneer will open up. And, for some reason, as these houses were flooded, when the original gutting process occurred after the hurricane, they removed the drywall, they removed the insulation, and some of the wall sheathing used to that, depending on the age of the house, the era was a bagasse board. And when it got wet, it actually turned into like shredded wheat. So sometimes they removed the sheathing between the backside of the brick veneer and the exterior wall framing. And when the drywall was removed from the Chinese drywall event and in the insulation, that was exposed again. Some houses were retrofitted because of the sheeting being removed during the original construction, and some were not. And it gave us another second bite of the apple, so to speak, on correcting some of that. So, we're able to come in and put in a drainage plane on the backside of the brick veneer, put in an air barrier, and then re-insulate it, and then hang, drywall. My preference was to use a paperless drywall, the fiberglass tape, under those scenarios, that's my go-to for a lot of these homes that are experiencing moisture problems. And then, of course, at that point, you're priming, you're painting, you're doing your flooring, your millwork, and everything else. So I do see occasional Chinese drywall house, maybe one a year now, not very often, but they're still out there.
I guess the next question is kind of a follow-up. When you go out on one of these properties, what do you think when the client has also hired an industrial hygienist? How do you relate to that?
I think that's fantastic. I think they're a great member of the team, particularly one who wants to identify or help identify causation. My biggest heartburn is when there is a indoor air quality concern or organic growth. And listen, I'm using the word organic growth because I've been deposed by attorneys too many times. When you call it mold, it's like, well, sir, did you identify that? No. So it's an unidentified black object. So organic growth, however you want to describe it. So let me just clarify why I say that term. The attorneys have kind of drilled that into me. I really like the fact that I am part of that team so I can help them identify causation so they don't wrestle with this problem again in the future. If they're just there and they're taking sampling and sending it to a laboratory and identifying what it is, that's only part of the problem. The other part of the problem is, what do we do to prevent this from happening again? And I think that's what a team approach brings to the table, so that homeowner or the building owner doesn't have to wrestle with this a couple of years in the future.
Yeah, I think that's important. They've already paid for it twice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Insurance doesn't cover it the second time.
Right. Joe, are you back or?
Yeah, I'm back. Let's stop and thank our sponsors here at halftime. We'll be back. We're going to go through the rest of these slides. You got to stick around for this. We'll be back in 2 minutes with Paul LaGrange. Our marquee sponsor, Instascope. More jobs done faster with the future of IAQ assessment technology. Unlimited samples, instant results, and cloud-based data at instascope.co. Our association sponsors are AIHA, Healthy Workplaces, a Healthier World, at aiha.org. ACGIH, Advancing Careers of Professionals in Environmental Health, Industrial Hygiene, and Safety, interested in defining their science, at acgih.org. The Cleaning Industry Research Institute, see more deeply through science and research, at CIRIScience.org. The Indoor Air Quality Association, promoting the exchange of indoor environmental quality information through education and research, at IAQA.org. The Restoration Industry Association, the granddaddy of the restoration industry, network with leaders, at restorationindustry.org. The IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry, at iicrc.org. And Healthy Buildings America 2021 in Honolulu, Hawaii, August 10 through 12, 2021, at hb2021-america.org. IAQ Radio industry sponsors are AEML Laboratories, free shipping, great pricing, same-day results with no rush fee at aemlinc.com. Particles Plus, feature-rich particle counters and air quality instrumentation. Count on us at particlesplus.com. Gray Wolf Sensing Solutions, over 20 years manufacturing accurate, reliable IAQ instrumentation for portable, short-term, and continuous monitoring, at graywolfsensing.com. TSI Inc., an industry leader in precision instrumentation for monitoring indoor air. Learn how to expand your IAQ investigations at tsi.com. and Healthy Indoors Magazine, a free online magazine for industry professionals and consumers at healthyindoors.com. All right, we're back for the second half. We've got Paul LaGrange, a building scientist, take on methods, myths, and mistakes. John, let's go back to the slides and look at the next one. There we go. All right, so what do we have here? Looks like, I'm not positive. Looks like some ghosting on the carpet there, Paul.
So sometimes homeowners contribute to the differential pressures inside the house. When the air conditioner or heater is running and they close in the bedroom doors and the return air intake is in the hallway or the common area of the house, that bedroom becomes positively pressurized and the hallway and the common area of the home become under negative pressure when the HVAC's working, the door's closed. And if you look at the top left-hand side of that top photograph, you'll see a bunch of dust that's accumulated on the doorstop. And measured with a manometer, it's got 14.1 pascals when the door's closed and the HVAC system is operating. So far, far greater than, Joe Stieberg's recommendation, no more than 3 pascals differential between one side of the door and the other. And, the carpet at the bottom, that ghosting, it's just collecting the dust. And, folks are always complaining, my gosh, it's warm in these bedrooms and the air conditioner's running and I have moisture problems in my, my den and my kitchen and I don't know why. And it's not one door closed. Man, I get to these homes and there's like 4 or 5 doors closed all the time. And people close doors for a lot of different reasons. And I try to get them to change their behavior. I haven't had much success, to be honest with you. I don't have much success in trying to convince them to increase the temperature of their house during the summertime to get above the summertime dew point temperatures. And I also don't have much success in getting them to open the doors. And if you notice, you got such a high difference of pressure, you can't undercut this door high enough where aesthetically it's pleasing and still allow enough free airspace for the supplier to go from the bedroom into the hallway. So at this point, you need to have like a Tamarack, passive air product, or you could put an active return air in that space and balance it with a damper to get some equal pressures between return and supply.
All right. Cliff, do you have a follow-up?
I do, Paul. One of the things that I noticed, that Joe and I noticed living in the north, is that typically when they put in the heating and ventilation system up here in Pennsylvania, generally every room is going to have both return and supply. And I know sometimes going down south, that's where they tend to only have perhaps one in the hallway or whatever. So I'm just wondering if it's a southern thing or, do these houses generally only have 1 or 2 cold air returns, or do they have them in every room as well?
So your method is far superior than what we're doing down south, Cliff. And I would prefer that we had a return supply in every large room inside the house so that we can have better temperature control and not have those differential pressures. But it is very common in the south just to have 1, sometimes 2 return air intakes, and it does cause some issues. I'm not picking on the engineers, but the term is valued engineering. Essentially, it's the HVAC installer and the homeowners and builders that are driving this because they're trying to save cost, but they're creating other problems. And I really, if I'm involved with this project early on, or if I'm solving a problem, the very first thing I'm going to talk about is we need to do something different to avoid having this problem.
Thanks.
Let's go to the next one, John. We're going to have to get moving here because we'll never get through them all. All right. Effects of differential pressure. We've got a thermal imaging camera here. What's going on here, Paul? Oh, I see the condensation on that diffuser too. Okay.
Sure. Absolutely. So this is the part of the house that has that negative pressure, and that infrared thermal imaging scan on the left-hand side, that's a knee wall. So that wall, the upper portion of the wall is exposed to an adjacent attic. And it's just drawing in some heat from that attic, and because of the negative pressures, it's making it worse. And sometimes depending on the temperature and the saturation rate of that drywall, you may have some organic growth. And then the supply register on the right hand side is it's just condensing, reaching dew points, condensing because of the negative pressures inside the house. At least this portion of the house is drawing in either the attic or the outdoor moisture. And voila, we it's raking across those cool surfaces and we get some condensation.
What about the solution on this one, Paul?
So my first go-to is let's do something to prevent the differential pressures. And then the other part of this is let's do an active air barrier on the attic side of this new wall, because a lot of times it's just insulation that's in the stud cavities. On the attic side, you don't have that recommended air barrier. So let's go ahead and put a continuous uninterrupted air barrier on the attic side. If the insulation's falling out of the cavity, let's replace that first before we put that air barrier up. And then let's try and prevent those cool surfaces from condensing.
All right, let's go to the next one. Oh, here's a beauty. Okay, we got some exterior sheathing that looks like, what is that, eaves?
I see this with eaves, and also see it with conventional metal lath cement-based stucco. A lot of folks in the South, for some reason, don't put in a drainage plane, and they'll apply it directly to sometimes a single layer of a building wrap, and not have multiple layers. And just you have a poor flashing job for the window above it. And when it rains, and keep in mind, we're in the South, we get 40 to 60 inches of annual rainfall. If that window is not properly flashed, that water is going to get to that stucco right below it. As you can see, where the building paper has been removed, that's where the majority of the moisture problems were occurring.
Yeah, wind driven. You get a lot of wind driven rain too, I'm sure.
Yes, sir.
All right, go to the next one, John.
Same scenario. It's just a lower part, and look at how much that OSB wall sheathing has deteriorated. This is a house that's actually only 2.5 years old. I remember this house well. Wow. And it was look at the flashing on the window. At first look, it appears to be correct, but once you remove this window, you'll realize that sill flashing is not installed properly, we also did not have a drainage plane for the stucco. So
was any of this?
We didn't have a weep screed at the bottom of the stucco either.
Okay.
So it's just holding that water.
So this water was mostly coming from above, but you may have also gotten some from below.
So bouncing back up from the bottom, it just became accumulated at the bottom of that stucco wall. This was a cement-based metal lath stucco. You can see there's some remnants of that metal lath on the face of that.
Oh yeah,
house cap. So it's just all around. This is an industry failure. This was not a homeowner failure. This was an industry failure.
You know, the same thing happens with stone, with the faux stone, in this case, looks like there's just one layer of house wrap. If they had put a second layer of house wrap on, and of course flashed that properly, do you think that would have solved this problem, or it was coming eventually anyway? There's no weep screed, obviously, but.
I think it's a large step in the right direction to have multiple layers for that bond break, and also have that place for the moisture to weep out the bottom. And if they had the correct flashing, when we get as much rainfall as we get here in the South, I sure would like to have a more robust drainage plane that would separate not only the pressures, but also have a pathway for that water to weep out to the bottom.
Okay, let's go to the next one, John. Industry homeowner challenges. Maintaining indoor temperatures below outdoor dew points, all right, and large cooktop exhaust fans, closing interior bedrooms we talked about, and water vapors on the inside of assemblies. Let's take a look at the next one. There we go. Oh, here we go, Paul. Talk to us about this one.
So this is some folks that applied, my friends from up north, that building science to a home down south.
That's Canadian building science there, huh?
If you look carefully in the upper part of the photograph where the sheetrock's been removed, but the plastic visqueen still in place, you can see some black organic growth on the face of that fiberglass insulation. And then the lower part, you can see where the plywood wall sheathing is discolored. So you definitely had some moisture that was occurring between the outside of the insulation and the inside face of that plywood wall sheathing. The water vapor barrier being on the inside of the assembly in the Gulf South, this is a bad idea. And I do run into this probably a handful of times every year.
Is there any way to fix that without tearing everything out and redoing it?
That's a great question, Joe. And I haven't come up with one yet. I mean, there's some things we can do to try and protect that exterior assembly from air leakage, from the temperature we can, we're keeping inside the house, from making sure we don't have any rainwater intrusion happen to the exterior wall. I think those are steps in the right direction. But for me to hang my hat on and say that is going to solve all your problems, I can never say that, because there are going to be times when you are going to have some water diffusion or some vapor diffusion coming in that wall, and you still possibly could have some problems.
All right.
I don't know.
Let's try and get a couple more in real quick before we go to the roundup. What do we have here, Paul? This is a beauty. Okay.
I love seeing this, and I probably see this about a dozen and a half times a year. We have an installer that said, let me go ahead and put some really good expensive spray polyurethane foam on the inside of the roof deck to address the temperatures, but we're still going to have ventilation in your attic. So we're still coming in with intake air at the overhangs or the soffits, and we're going to exhaust at the top or near the ridge of the peak of the roof. In this case, we're using a wind turbine. I've seen it with power ventilators with exhaust fans, which really make this building science go crazy, in the sense that all the cool surfaces, back to the statement, a lot of times we don't want to give up real estate below the ceiling. So we place our air conditioning equipment and our supply ductwork in the attic space. And we make the attic cooler because of the spray foam, but we're still bringing in the outside moisture. And those cool surfaces within this environment are going to reach dew point very, very fast. And it's going to sweat, and it's, eventually it's going to grow mold and stain your ceiling.
What's the solution here? Just dehumidify that air in the attic, or find a way to balance it out a little bit temperature wise?
So my first suggestion is we need to air seal. Let's make this a true unvented semi-conditioned attic space. And let's go ahead and close off the ventilation intake and exhaust. And if, depending on the quality of the installation of the spray foam and also the pitch of the roof, we may or may not have to add a dehumidifier to that attic space. There are a lot of times we're adding dehumidifiers to the attic space because you can't get it airtight. A lot of these homes aren't really candidates for spray foam. And our industry does a poor job of identifying when we should or shouldn't use spray polyurethane foam on existing houses. If it's new construction, you have access. If it's existing retrofits, sometimes you don't have the proper access.
Would you also suggest having that spray foam cover those 2x4s there?
I would. And if you notice, this was a closed cell product that was installed very thin. You can see that's, it's 3/4 inch thick. In reality, you certainly need something thicker to get a higher R value. And then I would definitely cover all that wood framing for the rafters, as well as the ridges and the hips and the valleys.
All right, John, let's see if we can get one more in real quick. User air, Paul, what do we have here? Oh, I know what this one is. All right.
I love my homeowners in the summertime. They're lowering the thermostat to be comfortable because they're trying to remove more moisture, or they just plain like it cold. And when you're summertime here in the Gulf South, when the outside summertime dew point temperature is in the low 70s and your thermostat set to 69 degrees, you're almost guaranteeing to have moisture problems inside your house. And then you have the fan in the on position versus the auto position. So when your outside condenser's cycled on, it's dehumidifying inside your home. And when the thermostat temperature is satisfied, the fan continues to run when the outside condenser turns off. Well, you've taken all that moisture you paid good money for to remove in the evaporator coil, and you're redistributing it back into your home. So you're actually increasing the relative humidity in your house, not decreasing. So this is getting kicked in the knees a number of different ways. And quite frankly, it's a common occurrence.
Interesting. Hey, Paul, can you stick around an extra 10 minutes?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
All right, let's go to the roundup at 1 o'clock, guys. I'd like to get through some more of these slides. Let's go to another one, John. All right, here's the homeowner's solution to a leaky attic. Oh, okay, this is beautiful.
Listen, this is an actual picture of one of my customers, and they got really creative to keep that attic pull down stair from coming down. They start off with tape. When tape didn't work, they pushed something into the underside of the door to keep it from falling down and letting that hot, moist, dusty attic air to come in inside the house. So, yeah, we got to do a little better than this.
Is that That hallway seems really narrow. Is that common?
No, it's not. It just, I guess it was a retrofit and they didn't make it very wide.
Okay. Next one, John. Industry lies. Number one, insulating without a drainage plane or air barrier is okay. All right. Two, variable capacity systems perform like dehumidifiers. And three, variable capacity air handlers can overcome poor duct design. Let's go to the next slide, John, and we'll show one of these, I'm sure. Oh, here's the facts. Paul, let's go through the facts.
So here's the challenge, and we kind of touch base on some of these. I really probably want to focus on what happens with variable capacity equipment. And this is the one I get most pushback on. And I get pushback on HVAC dealers and also HVAC suppliers. And I don't mean to be picking on any particular industry, except I don't like the message and how the message is communicated. And let me tell you the reason why. But first, before I start that, I have variable capacity HVAC equipment at my office as well as my home. I believe in the technology. I think it has a great place in the market under certain conditions. I think it doesn't have a place in the market under other certain conditions. So let me kind of break that down. If you're building a new construction home, by all means, you need to strongly consider variable refrigerant flow, because the technology is superb in comfort, for temperature, for moisture control, for operating costs. It's just far superior, and that's what I have in my home, and it's a great product and great technology. However, when you take that same technology, you put it into a home that has a leaky building envelope, or it's a historic house, and the homeowners are promised you're going to dehumidify your home because there's a dehumidifier built into these systems. And I hate that terminology because that's not necessarily true. Yes, these systems do a far, far, far superior job of dehumidifying, removing moisture than single speed machines, particularly since we've changed from an R22 to a 410A refrigerant. And since we've gone from a 10 SEER system to a 13, 14 SEER system. Mm-hmm. They're absolutely right. There's no arguing that. But the problem is that these homeowners are expecting a dehumidifier when in reality it's not. And it's the way these products are sold and installed that I have some heartburn with. And when you have a homeowner who has a leaky environment and the building envelope is just allowing a large amount of air filtration, then you have a very cold interior because these systems run for longer periods of time at colder temperatures. You are at risk of the cool surfaces inside your home, as well as where the mechanical equipment is located, whether it's underneath a raised house in the crawl space or the equipment is installed in the attic. Those cold surfaces are going to reach dew point much faster with a variable capacity piece of equipment than they would be with a single speed machine that turns cycles on and cycles off. And it's the message that I have the biggest heartburn with, because people's expectations are terribly destroyed when it doesn't function the way they think a dehumidifier would function.
Okay. Are you doing a lot of adding dehumidification to existing systems?
I am. And we have a sister company that does installation of dehumidifiers. We're state licensed for HVAC, but we really don't install air conditioner heater systems. We're mostly focusing on the dehumidification. And we'll do that depending on the circumstance. We'll do that underneath a raised home. We'll do it for the inside living space, but also we're doing a lot in attic spaces too, because there are a lot of attics where the homeowners already paid thousands of dollars for variable speed equipment that they don't want to remove, but we need to address the moisture problem. So we're doing that with some active dehumidifiers and some other changes to the attic and the ventilation to accommodate that.
And I love the fact that they have these ventilating, filtering dehumidifiers today that I assume you're using some of these from, like April Air and
Ultra Air. Yes, sir.
Yep. So are you using a lot of those or?
We are.
Okay.
And depending on the location, I had mentioned to you earlier before the show, I was spending a lot of time at Grand Isle, which is an island at the end of the state of Louisiana on the edge of the Gulf of Mexico. When we get to dehumidifying in those really extreme locations, we're actually using dehumidifiers that are combined with desiccant wheels to overcome that extreme condition, because refrigerated type without desiccant really can't keep up.
Interesting. Any thoughts on we're adding these dehumidifiers now, ventilating, filtering dehumidifiers, but I wonder if people ever look at the coils and clean them and maintain them. Any thoughts on that?
So one of the things we do, our sister company offers, is that not only do we design and install, but we use Wi-Fi data loggers, and we monitor the conditions of the space we're gaining control over. And then we come back every 6 months and change the filter of the humidifier, put in pan tablets to make sure that the drains don't get clogged up with fungal growth. And we're verifying the performance. We're measuring the incoming air temperature and the outgoing air temperature to make sure that machine, that dehumidifier, is performing at capacity. And we do that every 6 months. And we also change the batteries of the data loggers so that we can also, get live data of, and as well as email alerts of what's happening in that condition to make sure it's performing the way we promised it's going to perform.
Very interesting. Let's get another slide in, John. I got about 4 minutes till we go to to the roundup. All right. Believing the lie. What's this showing us, Paul?
I'm asking you to go to the next slide, if you don't mind, John, as well.
So yeah, better yet.
So this is a home that had wood siding, but behind the wood siding was the stud framing. Didn't have any wall sheathing, didn't have a drainage plane. And this house was insulated with a insulation in the wall cavity after Hurricane Katrina. And over time, it just decayed and rotted. The siding just rotted and fell off the wall. And then they got termites on top of that. And the problem is that when they rebuilt this home, no one took into account that we need to put a drainage plane directly behind this wood siding to allow the water that went through the siding or around the old window flashing, whatever it was coming into the wall cavity, let it weep and drain out to the bottom and keep this wood siding dry, because it became saturated. It stayed saturated because it was in full contact with the insulation behind it. And then eventually the insulation wasn't performing to the R value you expected to, because it got wet and stayed wet. And then you had mold growth or organic growth. And it just, the millwork started deteriorating. The paint on the inside of the sheetrock started bubbling. So it just was a bad approach.
And this can be done from inside. I think you've got some photos of that later in this presentation.
Yep. So here it is right here. So this is an historic house that was in the city of New Orleans that this homeowner wanted to rebuild their home and bring it into an era that was comfortable and had moisture control, had great indoor quality, but she was very concerned about building durability. So this is the ones I was able to get involved with before they started construction, which I love this because it allows me to help them solve some of the problems where we are concerned about the building durability before the fact, not after the fact. So in this one, it's historic district. We couldn't remove the siding. We couldn't change the windows. So everything we had to do was from the inside. We actually used a mesh rain slicker in between the studs so that knowing the water was coming through, you can see the water standing in the backside of the siding and the clapboards. With that rain slicker, allowed the water to come through, weep out towards the bottom. This was balloon framing. And then we put in a extruded polystyrene foam board on top of the home slicker. And we air sealed it to the studs to the left and to the right. And then we insulated with an open cell polyurethane foam. So we get the best of all the worlds. We created a drainage plane. We separated our wood siding so it wouldn't become saturated and stay saturated. It would dry. So we didn't have the problems with the peeling paint on the exterior or the wood decaying. We have an air barrier. We have a thermal barrier, which was never there before. And then we used a paperless drywall with fiberglass tape with a properly sized and designed HVAC system. And she is so comfortable in this house. I touch base with her probably about once every 2 years just to connect with her. And then we use green building products because this was actually part of the National Home Builders Association green building tour that they hosted in New Orleans shortly after Hurricane Katrina. So I love protecting the structure first. I think that needs to be a priority, and everything else comes along with it. If you're protecting building durability, your indoor air quality, your comfort, your low operating cost all come for a free ride, and it really works well.
Fantastic. John, I think maybe there's slides that show some of what he just talked about coming up here. No, maybe not.
No, keep going. There you go. There's one.
There you go. That's the water drainage space.
Yes.
plastic mesh, and then you put, okay, go back one more, John. Put that.
You see how we, go ahead, I'm sorry.
You see that foam they're putting, go ahead.
So we put the extruded polystyrene foam board in between the studs, and we're separating that from the insulation. We did this improvement before the electrician and plumber came in and roughed in. We let them rough in after this, and then we came in and corrected any of the exterior wall penetrations, and then we insulated after the fact, right before using that paperless drywall. But if you get to the next slide, you'll see how we addressed the balloon framing. We didn't want to put a block all the way into the thickness of the studs. We just did it from the foam board towards the inside of the home because we didn't want to block where that water would weep to the bottom of that wall assembly. What's not shown is that we also applied closed cell spray polyurethane to the underside of the floor assembly. So when we got to the outside wall, we made absolutely certain that we didn't block off the bottom side of the home slicker or our weep screed, so to speak, so that when the water got in the wall, it would have a place to drain. It wasn't blocked by the closed cell foam on the underside of the flooring.
Very interesting. Let's go. There you go. This is the finishing up here, I think, Paul.
Yes, sir.
We did talk about the flood repairs too with when we did the show with Claudette. Let's go to the roundup, John. All right, let's bring on the restoration industry global watchdog, Pete Consigli. You still with us, Pete?
Of course, can't you see me in the Zoom?
I'm so fascinated.
Well, I just turned the Zoom on a little bit. So, Joe, I got a lunch today with Blotchinger at 1:00, but then he had some IICRC meeting he had to have. Well, it was going to be at noon. We were going to call in with the cannolis for the roundup on my phone. But then what happened is he had an IICRC standards call, which is over to 1. So I said, we'll meet at 1:15 because he's over here in Naples doing an inspection from the other side of Alligator Alley. So I figured, all right, we'll do that. But something told me I'm going to be late. And you confirmed that at 10 minutes to 1 when you said, all right, let's go to 1:00 with the case studies because I knew you couldn't end it. And so anyway, we'll Blotchinger away. He'll get there first and get the table. Listen, I got to tell you, I think that this model has been permanently set for future IAQA shows by doing these case studies in the second half, because not only did all the live-in callers love them, it generates a lot of questions, but I think it adds a lot of value. Maybe we ought to just figure on slightly expanding the show a few minutes just so people know on these kind of shows, so we actually have time to do justice, and we don't always have to bump it back. But I think I could kind of see that's where we're going with this, because it's really these case studies really gives the true the lessons learned and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, once Paul started doing these podcasts on Saturdays, I got to tell you, for all the years of the summer camp, he always would take off to go do the Paul's house during the summer camp thing. In the early years, I didn't realize what the heck he was doing. And then eventually I said, well, what's this Paul house stuff? I will tell you a little bit of history. When I first met Paul, didn't really know he was Paul then. Do you remember when it was, Paul, when we first met?
I do.
Tell me when it was.
So that was 2005, my first year at building science camp.
Nah, it was before then. You see,
Really?
You didn't remember. It was in the late 90s, I believe. All right. And Glenn Ray and Huey and Harvey, when he was alive, that whole little group of guys, the Cajun restoration guys,
Yes.
from Lafayette and Baton Rouge, they were connected with Claudette at the Extension Institute. And that was back in the day before I took my sabbatical, when the hottest duo on the restoration education mold comedy circuit was Mac Pierce and Pete Consigli. We traveled all over the country doing these programs.
Yeah.
And Glenn organized us to come down to Baton Rouge and do one there at that Claudette sponsored at the Institute. And you were there in the audience, as I recall. I'm not sure whether you were a trainer then with her or not. And then I remember years later at summer camp, I met Claudette, or I saw Claudette there. I hadn't seen her. And then a couple of years after that, you kind of came along, and then one thing led to another. And now the legacy of the executive chef at summer camp carries on. Now there's two little things that a lot of people may not know. Paul's half Sicilian, and the other half is that Cajun, right?
Yes.
And the other thing is his roots initially were in restoration. So in the summer camp legacy of the lineage of executive chefs, the Sicilian tradition, yep, and the restoration influence still lives on. And it's kind of interesting. I don't really have much, to say from the interview. I think the interview was great. You do a terrific job. And I think that, the whole thing with building science is really something that the industry didn't really understand. I got to give my shout out to Mr. Zlotnick, because what a lot of people don't recognize with the Z-Man is well, first of all, anyone who knows him knows that he's an innovator. He's got insights, and he's the original trailblazer, and there's nobody that really is ever going to supplant him as long as he has a breath. And, he's not in a home somewhere. And if you do decide to go in one, come to Florida. Definitely don't go to New York, but we'll leave it at that. Now, the one thing I will say is this. In the 90s, when he first met Mac, and then through another friend of ours met Joe, we brought the building science training to REA under the Water Loss Institute in the mid-90s. That's how we met Joe. That's what led to summer camp. And this is how all this stuff is kind of carried on. And I think we have a whole new generation of people in the industry now who need to be trained and understand why knowing building science training is important, whether they're environmental consultants, mold guys, restoration guys, the construction trades, whatever they're in. And in the very early days of doing the building science training with RAA, there was the emerging mold and like the drying niche, Joe. And we thought that they would be the guys that would be the most interested to come. But we found out that they weren't. The guys who were the most interested were all the old school fire reconstruction guys. They came in droves. And what they realized is, and they were obviously were doing the water work too, but they understanding these principles allowed them to deal with the pressure differentials, all the migration and how the moisture and everything goes through these buildings, that helped them with their reconstruction projects, evaluating, all that restoration stuff. And then, of course, years later, Marty King came for 2 years. Those of you summer camp guys, and quite a few of you really are summer camp guys who are in the live and thread. But Marty came, and then Joe had him do a cameo presentation there the 1 year, which was really a big success. And Marty, the presentation was on dealing with building science principles and air movement and pressurization, and how to use them and apply them in detecting smoke odors and fire restoration. Joe said that the audience really found it useful and helpful because it was a little different, for the summer camp audience. So, it's kind of been a long history. And I think, through interviews with a lot of the summer camp people at IAQ Radio and a lot of the Moisture Mob people, that this whole new emerging group who were all the flooring guys that started at restoration years ago. And now we kind of come back together to, to help pass on what we know and to cross-pollinate. I mean, I think the show really, in all sincerity, is right in the middle of this. And quite frankly, I don't believe, outside of a lot of the loyal listeners and people who reach out to guys like me and Cliff and others, they have no idea what a resource the IAQ archives are. And Cliff, you're looking at me, you put that in the blog, because I don't think they realize the hundreds of people that you interviewed, the in-depth nature, the early, before anyone even could pronounce podcast, through talk show that IAQ Radio was on. The job of in the early years of all the guys that guys got to interview, it's the who's who, and a lot of these guys are not with us anymore. And then before blogs became, fashionable and people knew what they were, then Cliff started doing them several years back. And then as we do these follow-up shows with guys like Steve Brook and Mac and Major and Spivak, and I could keep going on, and Claude, then what happens is, we integrate the first interview with the second. And now you have a blog, because a lot of people may or may not want to have the time to listen to the podcast, but they'll read the blog. And I think that's unbelievably powerful to archive and document industry history that you can't find anywhere else. And the fact you can get it for free and really, appreciate and thank the sponsors that allow this show to be offered for that. Joe, you always say this and you guys recognize it. I'm not sure that people really understand it. Maybe they think, here he goes, just giving a tap on the shoulder. No, those guys really need the recognition and deserve it because they basically help provide this service to the industry. And quite frankly, I just think it's just second to none. So, I don't know. Thanks for letting me go on the rant, but I got a new haircut. You notice I'm not wearing my cap today because I'm going out in public with my buddy to our 19th hole. Is anyone who comes to South Florida, come visit me. I got the Romos here about 5 minutes from my house. It won't be that late. And we eat outdoors. They do all the COVID principles. They follow all the CDC protocols. Florida is not crazy like the media sometimes reports. People pay attention down here. We just kind of, do our thing. But I've met a lot of guys there who come down, and anytime anyone's in the area, definitely give me a call and let us know. So anyway, thanks for the time, Joe and Cliff. Paul, great job. Appreciate all of you guys that called in live, John Lapator, Ed Light, Don Weeks, Mickey Lee got a chance. Last week he couldn't call in because, he was doing his global webinar. And one of the younger millennial guys, I'll give a shout out, John Isaacson, that's got a great his little deal that he does, kind of a different alternative kind of podcast and, more in the line of what Jeff Cross and the Straight Talk people do. And, it's alternative. There's room in the marketplace for everyone. I'm glad they're all calling in. Hope they get some value and, the networking opportunities abound. Paul, I don't know if I'm going to see in August. Joe will make a decision by the end of April. But other than that, I mean, you only live off the I-10. If I go north on 75 and before I get into Georgia to go to Atlanta, I take a left, I'm going to wind up in New Orleans. Maybe we need to meet at some halfway point, along the I-10, I-75 corridor, just because that ain't a bad thing. And bring your better half with you, too. I always enjoy having sitting down and breaking bread with Charlene.
I would be happy to. That sounds like a plan.
Pete. Much appreciated. Cliff, anything you want to add before we go?
I'm done. I think Pete said it all and more.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Pete. And before we go, Paul, anything you'd like to add? Anything we missed?
Listen, it's been a pleasure hanging out with you guys today. I love talking this stuff. And I love seeing the pioneers like Pete was just talking about and learn from them. And there's always something, learn something new each and every day. And I love this being here and the resources y'all have. So thank you for having me. It's been a privilege.
Well, it shows that you love talking about it, Paul. And we really appreciate you joining us today. This is Radio Joe Hughes saying thanks to this week's guest, Paul LaGrange, to my co-host, the Z-Man, Cliff Slotnick, to the restoration industry global watchdog, Pete Consigli. John, you got to have faith at the controls. Most importantly, our growing group of loyal listeners will be back next Friday at noon with the next episode of IAQ Radio Plus.
For IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reel saying thanks for listening.